So, the Montreal Canadiens made themselves some huge headlines yesterday. They had re-signed defenseman Kaiden Guhle to a 6-year extension with an AAV of $5.5 million a year. This was seen as a pretty significant move, and for good reason. I mean, Kaiden Guhle is a young guy, he is a valued defenseman, and if he becomes what a lot of Canadiens fans are expecting him to be, this $5.5 million AAV deal could be seen as a steal at some point in the future. However, when it comes to Kaiden Guhle and the negotiations that preceded the actual contract signing itself, we had ourselves some news posted out by Nicolas Cloutier on Instagram, or not Instagram, excuse me, this was on Twitter. Nicolas Cloutier, of course, is on TVA and he does his stuff with the program over there. But he made this tweet yesterday that spoke about the Montreal Canadiens' perspective about the Kaiden Guhle deal and how Montreal actually rejected a different contract offer. Take a look at this tweet made by Nick Cloutier. Je viens de parler à l'agent de Guhle, Alain Roy. Le camp de Guhle at... Okay, we're not going to read that. I just spoke to Kaiden Guhle's agent, Alain Roy. Guhle's camp tested the waters for going up to 8 years at a salary similar to Jake Sanderson. But it was a firm no from Kent Hughes' side. And so with this in mind, I thought it was a really interesting idea that Kaiden Guhle and his camp was trying to go for that Jake Sanderson deal, and how quickly it seems that the Montreal Canadiens staff went, hell nah, buddy. Just in case you needed the update here, Jake Sanderson is on an 8-year contract himself. It goes on till 2032, and his AAV is $8.05 million a year. That, of course, is very expensive, and maybe it's not expensive for what Jake Sanderson is supposed to be and for what Ottawa Senators fans believe Jake Sanderson is right now. But when you think about the comparisons and what kind of precedents a contract like this would look like in the context of the Montreal Canadiens, it becomes a lot easier to understand why the Habs immediately said, okay, sorry, no, we're not giving you the Jake Sanderson contract. Now, interestingly enough, if you went out there and tried to compare and contrast both of these guys, Jake Sanderson is 22 years old, 2020 5th overall pick by the Ottawa Senators, and in this most recent season of play with the Sens, he had 38 points in 79 games played. Honestly, I think that's a little bit down compared to what Senators fans thought he'd be able to do, especially when you consider that he had 32 points in 77 games last year with the Sens, but things were really bad for a lot of the Ottawa Senators. I mean, a lot of their guys just did not produce as much as they could have, so I think Sanderson kind of got caught up in there. Tim Stützle had a down year, Brady Tkachuk had a down year, everybody kind of had a down year with Ottawa, so I don't think that the staggered and, let's just say, stable point production from Sanderson, the non-growth here, is too indicative of a bad thing. But when you compare Sanderson to Kaiden Guhle, he's also 22 years old, he also was a 2020 guy, he was drafted 16th overall though, whereas Anderson was drafted 5th, and Kaiden Guhle had even fewer points than Sanderson did in this most recent season's worth of play. 22 points, 70 games played, although with Canadiens fans, they all understand that the role that a guy like Jake Sanderson has offensively in Ottawa is totally not the same role that Kaiden Guhle has in Montreal. He isn't even the top power play quarterback guy. That honor belongs to Mike Matheson, and if everything goes well next season, Kaiden Guhle may not even be the second power play guy either. If Lane Hutson really takes over and, let's just say, moves Matheson to Unit 2 while Hudson's on Unit 1, then all of a sudden it's okay, crap, like there's nobody else that is going to be able to get power play time with Matheson and Hutson on the team. But that's okay, right? Because Canadiens fans acknowledge that Guhle was never supposed to be this high-flying offensive defenseman, right? He was never supposed to be that. So when you compare Guhle to Sanderson, while Sanderson has more points, and I think he does have a much higher offensive ceiling, there's a bit more stability, I would say, with Kaiden Guhle, defensively speaking, that Sanderson and Guhle, while you could say that they're both wildly different players, you could understand why the Guhle camp would have used Sanderson as a potential comparable. However, of course, when you think about the Sanderson deal, I mean, Sanderson is making more money AAV-wise than Caulfield, than Suzuki, than Slafkovsky, than everybody else on the Canadiens, except for, of course, Carey Price. And so it doesn't really fit the Canadiens' cap structure when you consider what Sanderson is actually getting. If Kaiden Guhle is using the Sanderson deal as a comparable, he's not going to get it. Like, straight up, Kent Hughes has all the right in the world to say, okay, you want this amount of money, great, but you're not going to get it because we're not going to pay you as much as Caulfield or Suzuki or Slafkovsky. You are just not going to get that dollar amount. And with that in mind, I also wanted to bring this idea up too, because the 8-year deal is what was seemingly brought up here in the context of the Jake Sanderson dollar amount, right? But the fact that the Canadiens did not go 8 years with Kaiden Guhle, they only went 6. That kind of says to me that they don't fully believe in him as much as they believe in a Slafkovsky or a Caulfield, and that is totally fine. Like, that is not controversial, or I don't think it should be controversial in the slightest, because if you would ask Canadiens fans, yeah, what are the odds that Slafkovsky pans out to his 10 out of 10 potential, it's probably higher than the odds that Kaiden Guhle pans out to his 10 out of 10 potential, or what are the odds that Slafkovsky busts? I think that's a lot lower percent odds than Kaiden Guhle busting too. Okay, we're gonna have to stop using that verb. It's probably inappropriate there. But you kinda get what I'm saying, right? Even though Kaiden Guhle is good and everybody expects him to be good, the odds of him kind of rounding out and not progressing past a certain point do exist. And I don't think those same odds are as high with other players like Slafkovsky or Caulfield or Suzuki even. We even saw this yesterday, but in the contract comparisons for Kaiden Guhle, the most notable ones were guys like Rasmus Ristolainen and Brett Pesce and other guys that didn't really have the best consistent careers, but who at one point in their younger days did look like they would be these fantastic shutdown defensive guys. Ristolainen had a crazy up-and-down career as his entire time in the NHL continued. He was kind of the epitome of that profile, and he was the #1 comparison with Kaiden Guhle. So, for Guhle, I don't want to say that it's guaranteed that he's going to become this amazing guy. I think it's very likely that he does, but the fact that there is room to doubt him a little bit makes me understand why the Canadiens did not go a full 8 years with him, especially when you consider the fact that Guhle and his camp going for 8 years would have been asking for $8-point-something million a year like Jake Sanderson got. If Sanderson was the standard, then I don't think Kaiden Guhle really had a chance, because Sanderson right now, I'd say, is a more polished, offensively leaning defenseman who also does have good mobility and defensive responsibility. There is a role there in Sanderson in Ottawa that is not going to be attained by Kaiden Guhle at any point in his career if the rest of the Canadiens' defensive core rounds itself out in the ways that it should. If Hudson becomes as good as he should be, if Reinbacher becomes as good as he should be, if Mailloux becomes as good as he should be, and even if Matheson sticks around as well, then there's no real path for Kaiden Guhle to ever have some sort of a Jake Sanderson-like impact in terms of magnitude of importance to the team. Right? So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about this entire Jake Sanderson, Kaiden Guhle contract comparison thing, and how Kent Hughes rejected an 8-year idea tossed out there by the Kaiden Guhle party. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as to how this is. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.